Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Right Guys podcast, where we celebrate the next president of the United States birthday. Happy birthday, Donald Trump. And now your hosts, Josh Hammerling and Max McGuire.
Welcome back to another edition of the Right Guys podcast. My name is Max McGuire here with Mr. Producer Josh Hammerling. I'm just looking at these pictures, Josh. That's my old 3D printed bump stock.
I'm so sorry. What happened to her?
I had to destroy it.
Pretty.
I had to destroy it under threat of prosecution and felony indictment from my government. A threat that the Supreme Court, as of this morning, has determined is, and always was unconstitutional and illegal. Supreme Court today declared that the Trump era, this is something that that people forget. This was a Trump era regulation. Banning bump stocks after the the Las Vegas shooting.
Las Vegas, yeah. And we were critical of it when he did it, when it happened. He was obviously bending to political pressure, and I didn't support it. I never had purchased a bump stock. I think I shot one once, but it's hard enough to shoot and save money when you're not, shooting 2 or 3 rounds at a time, right? I mean, you can blow through.
I hated money. I put my bump stock on my 50 Beowulf AR. So I was shooting 50 Beowulf full auto at DCF guns. That was fun.
Oh, I bet it would. Yeah.
I wasn't just like opposed to this from the very beginning. I was very publicly published opposed to this. This is the Federalist. Federalist.com. This is an op-ed I wrote back on February 22nd of 2018. Trump's proposed bump stock ban is either lawless, stupid, or both. I don't believe that was the exact headline that I gave them. But I walked through the whole thing. They put all these ads in it. They gotta do what they gotta do. It is nice to have a little bit of vindication because it's felt like I was just screaming for years, this is illegal, this is unconstitutional, this is not how it works. It's like that meme, that's not how any of this works. There's a sense of vindication to it for sure, that what we've been talking about, what I've been talking about, what you've been talking about all these years, we've been right, that having a stock on your gun that happens to slide a little bit doesn't make your gun into a machine gun.
No.
And that's really the important bit of all of this. Bump stocks are, you can 3D print a bump stock. I 3D printed my bump stock. I also had a bump stock that I bought from a manufacturer, injection molded. You can make a bump stock just by taking an M4 AR-15 stock, and the little pin that locks into place, you just unscrew that pin. And then that's going to freely move forward and backward on the buffer tube. Now, if you want to really do a good job with it, you got to add some kind of attachment to the end of it for you to rest your finger against. But the crux of the bump stock is basically just a thumb hole stock that isn't completely pinned into the buffer tube.
Interesting.
Now, for everyone who doesn't know, the way a bump stock works, usually you have to pull the trigger on a gun, and then you let go of the trigger for it to reset, and then you pull the trigger again to fire a second time for a semi-automatic firearm. What the bump stock does is it harnesses the recoil of the gun to reset the trigger, and then uses your non-shooting hand, your non-dominant hand, to push the gun forward to basically push the trigger up against your stationary finger. Essentially, the way a bump stock works is rather than waiting for the trigger spring to reset a trigger, it uses the recoil of the gun. So think about that. What's faster, the recoil of a gunshot or an itty-bitty little spring? Unsurprisingly, it's the gunshot. And what's stronger, your pointer finger or your left tricep? Generally, your bicep and tricep are stronger than your pointer finger. They tried to say that was a machine gun. And it pains me. We can put them up again. This was my 3D printed bump stock that I made in neon green just to make sure it stood out. I also had this poor boy, injection molding from Bump Fire. I think with Bump Fire Solutions. Both had to take a hacksaw to both.
Yeah.
Had to cut them both. This one cost me $100 at the time, with adjusted for inflation is like $1 million today.
Now maybe 100 grand. I mean, don't over exaggerate. It's probably 100 grand.
Like $1 million
But,
today.
yeah.
The 3D printed one, I guess I could redo it. I have to fix my 3D printer, get it all up and working again. But the damage is done.
Mhm.
Millions of Americans have destroyed their bump stocks. You can't undestroy them. The whole destroying them is make them inoperable. The manufacturers that made these devices are gone. Slide Fire Solutions, I think they now make like hand guards and things like that, but they don't make bump stocks. They're gone. Bump fire systems, gone. These bump fire manufacturers, they were driven out of business by an ATF that was doing something illegal. The ATF went to these gun stores, Josh, and forced them to hand over, not just hand over all of their inventory, but to actually make sure it's shredded. There's videos from Texas of a gun store that had 60,000 bump stocks in stock.
Holy crap.
And they had to shred them. There's video of them going into like a recycling plant shredder.
My gosh. And just throwing it in that machine, right? That just turns, and they're just
retailing
money.
Retailing at $100 a pop. Those 60,000 bump stocks, that's over $6 million in merchandise that they unlawfully and unconstitutionally forced that business to destroy,
and most likely go bankrupt. Or who can take a hit like that and just absorb it? That's not easy in any business. Small hits hurt, right?
When you make a device and that's your bread and butter, and they try and make it illegal without an act of Congress, unsurprisingly, those bump stock manufacturers went belly up.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what they tried to do with pistol braces.
Yeah.
We're talking today. We have 3 big rulings. The first one, obviously, we're going to touch on, read a bunch from, is the Supreme Court saying that bump stocks were always legal, and it was always unconstitutional for Biden and Trump to go after them. But the other big ruling came from the Fifth Circuit, ruling that the pistol brace ban was also illegal from the very beginning.
What a day.
There are pistol brace manufacturers that are no longer in business because that was their main thing. Luckily, some of these manufacturers got some injunctive relief and have been able to stay in business. So they're still with us. But for bump stocks, it's gone. To my knowledge, there's no one still manufacturing bump stocks. At least on like a mass produced scale.
I don't know. I don't think people even sat on the inventory trying to hide it because it was just too dangerous to their gun stores to be able to do such a thing, right? I mean, it was such a clear government overreach that it should have never happened. But how many times do we have to sit here and just keep fighting for basic rights? We see on the wall that on its face it was illegal, but we did nothing about it. We just sat there and accepted the government taking away another right. I mean, it's getting to be too much, Max. We can't take this anymore.
What's been really hard is I've sent you court rulings. Like, hey, Josh, we just got a major victory. And then I read the fine print. It's like, oh, no, that only applies to us here in Texas and Louisiana and the rest of the Fifth Circuit. When Trump was in office, you would have rogue judges. Like there was that joke, the judge in Hawaii, who every time Donald Trump had an immigration related order, this one judge in Hawaii just happened to draw all of the challenges in Hawaii and just slap a nationwide injunction on the president of the United States from a federal district judge in Hawaii, nationwide injunctions. On our side, when we finally get a judge to agree with us, say, hey, what they're doing is unlawful, it's unconstitutional, please put a stop to it. They're so hesitant to go the nationwide injunction route. And it's strange because when you're ultimately vindicated and saying, yeah, they were violating everyone's Second Amendment rights for years. Yeah, I'm mad about the Trump administration officials. And don't get me wrong, Donald Trump pushed this thinking it would be popular. As mad as I am at the Biden and Trump officials who pushed this on us, right? I'm equally mad at the conservative leaning judges who recognized it was illegal, but let it stay on the books. They could have easily have slapped a nationwide injunction on this, recognized early on that this was a violation of our rights. Instead, Josh, this ban went into effect in 2018. Here we are in
Wow.
2024.
6
What
years?
business could possibly survive 6 years of litigation over this?
Nobody. Only the government can afford to fight litigation that long because they have the endless pockets. The rest of us have to pay for that out of our own pockets or get somebody to volunteer to take care of us. It's just it's just wild, Max. I mean, we also what was the big one that came out? Didn't Hawaii recently also say that in the spirit of aloha that
Yeah,
you had to
yeah.
ban the Second Amendment too? And
Yeah,
nobody
yeah,
does
yeah, yeah.
anything to
Yeah,
stand up and say
yeah,
this is a
you have the
statewide
right to
injunction on this.
have a gun, except the spirit of aloha demands that we not let you carry guns.
Which but it shows you the
But
gymnastics they're willing to do, right?
yeah,
I mean, we believe this is the spirit of the state, so you can't have something. We believe this is the
yeah.
spirit of what this is supposed to mean. So we got to suppress your freedoms. It's been the playbook for a while. It's always slow. It's always slow getting the right call, right? It's like an instant replay that's not instant. It's a replay that takes 6 years, and by then
Yeah.
people lose everything. Imagine you started a bump stock company and you put your whole world into it, knowing
Yeah.
it was full and legal when you did it, and then all of a sudden you're destitute because of it, right? Or you've got to shift and pivot so much you're not even the same company anymore, and there's no recourse for this. Who's going to
No,
pay
there's
back
not.
all these businesses for what they
No one.
lost?
That's the really poorly kept secret in all of this
Yeah.
is you win, you're allowed to the government was wrong. They violated your rights. They threatened to throw everyone in prison. Just so you know, this little item, I just took it down, but I'll put it back up. This little item that where'd it go now? This item that I 3D printed, right? I destroyed this. But if I had not destroyed it, and very publicly destroyed, I went on OAN that day and like held up the pieces.
Yeah,
Very publicly,
right.
openly destroying it. If I had not, that would be the equivalent of me owning an illegal machine gun.
Wow.
Like you think about the violations and statute and penalties for violating the National Firearms Act. In terms of gun crimes, that's about as bad as it gets.
Sure.
Minimum 5 years.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Right. And then they tack on everything. And I had two of them. Right?
Right. You're facing 2 felonies for that, right?
Yeah. 2 felonies.
Which is crazy.
2 felonies for an overnight reclassification.
Yeah.
And the really sad thing is that it wasn't the NRA that won this court victory. It wasn't what's the gun store organization? It's like the NSSF, the National Shooting Sports Foundation.
Yeah.
I believe they represent the gun stores and the gun manufacturers. It wasn't them that won this case. It was the Firearm Policy Center, FPC, who's great. You should follow them on Twitter. They're great. And this guy, Michael Cargill, an owner of a gun store in Austin, Texas, who I believe didn't challenge this as the business owner. He basically turned in under protest 2 of his own personal bump stocks and then became the lead plaintiff to sue over this for all these years. And he put out a video today. It's so nice. Like usually when there's these plaintiffs, they kind of disappear into the shadows. Like Dick Heller for a while, he was doing other challenges, but it's fun in the age of like TikTok to have someone as the named plaintiff in a Supreme Court case giving his take on the victory. Here's him on TikTok today.
News. I did it. Michael Cargill versus Merrick Garland. The Department of Justice, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the bump stock lawsuit. I beat him in the United States Supreme Court. I was told over 5 years ago, why are you going down this road? No one cares about bump stocks. Let's go ahead and let them take the bump stock. But instead, I stood and fought. And because of this, the bump stock case is going to be the case that saves everything. It's going to stop the ATF from coming after their brace, the triggers, all different parts and pieces that they're trying to ban. And I'm glad I stood up and fought. So now we have a case that is case law that we can move forward around this country and defend our Second Amendment rights.
Bravo.
I love this because like so often you have organizations like, look what we did. We did this. Donate to us. This guy's just like, I did it.
Yeah.
Everyone told me not to, but I did it.
Love America.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Right. And it's refreshing because, again, this wasn't the NRA. FPC is great, but they need plaintiffs. Anyone could have been a plaintiff. But this guy steps forward and he hands in 2 of his bump stocks under protest and sues. And I presume he's going to get them back. I bet you, though, the ATF's going to say, oh, yeah, we destroyed those.
We already destroyed them.
Yeah, we destroyed those. We can't just have, we lost them. Or we can't just have machine guns lying around. Of course we destroyed them.
It's not a machine gun, and we knew it from the start. What,
Yeah.
That's just the joke of it, right? And it just makes you think what else the ATF has deemed overnight to suddenly be illegal, right? I mean, if we started going through the list, which we've had before, it would blow people's minds. And now we have hope, right? We got one little bit of a chink taken out of the armor of the ATF, right? And these battles, some folks call them little battles, they're huge battles that get won. And it just makes it easier because now in Colorado, if they end up passing some of those bills in the next session that deal with just having a compensator on a gun, right, making it illegal. I mean, I'd have to go through the same steps, right? I'd have to turn one in a protest, become the plaintiff, and go through. But now there's more case law that says what I needed to say in my favor, right? That'll say these are not under your jurisdiction. You just can't change these things overnight, right?
Yeah. And what's really cool about this ruling is they don't talk about it by name, but this is basically it's not the beginning of the end, but it's probably the end of the beginning, or maybe even the end of the end, for Chevron deference. Chevron deference is the policy that says when the government makes a regulation, the people who make the regulations should be presumed to be experts. And therefore, courts should give deference to those regulators that they know more than one judge or 3 judges on a panel. Who are you to disagree with the ATF on what constitutes a machine gun, right? Now, lower courts can't just toss out Chevron deference. Chevron deference means that they have to give deference to the ATF unless it's overwhelmingly wrong. Supreme Court, though, they're not always bound by it. They can recognize that it's very, very wrong. And so this is a huge step towards getting rid of Chevron deference because you had all of these experts at the ATF, the head of the firearms technology branch, declaring that this is a machine gun. And 6 of the 9 Supreme Court justices just said, no, you're wrong.
Wow.
That might not seem like it's a big deal, but historically, when the government makes a regulation and they have experts, generally courts have not been willing to step in and say, I know more about guns than you, especially when the consequence of getting it wrong is suddenly everyone gets a machine gun. Mm-hmm. Now, the quote unquote experts, Josh, they're not experts. One of the funniest examples of this, and I put this in my book, Conservative's Guide to Winning Every Gun Control Argument. Talk about this. It is the shoestring machine gun. Have you ever heard of the shoestring machine gun?
Where the action would pull the trigger again as it moved forward, and it just goes
kind of,
right?
Kind of. You take an M1 carbine or an M1 Garand or an M14 kind of clone, and you attach a 14-inch string with loops on each end to the charging handle, and then this other loop here behind the trigger. That's what you're designed to pull. And the way it works is as long as you pull it continually, the charging handle will reset the trigger for you.
Interesting. Yeah.
That was determined to be a machine gun in, I believe it was 2004. 2004. But here's the rub. When the ATF did this, they were a little broad with it. They issued this order saying the FTB, Firearm Technology Branch, this was 1996. The original was 1996, sorry.
Yeah.
Examined the 14-inch long shoestring with a loop at each end. The string was attached to the cocking handle. Device caused the weapon to fire repeatedly. Because this device was designed and intended to convert a semi-automatic rifle into a machine gun, the FTB determined that it was a machine gun.
Wow.
So that was in 1996. This was a follow-up letter just for clarification. Now, the reason he was asking for clarification is actually very simple. Because if you read that specifically, and people can find it, the ATF didn't clarify that that application was a machine gun. What they said was any 14-inch long shoestring with loops at each end were machine guns.
So if I just had a string with 2 loops, I'm walking around, that's a machine gun? If it was in my pocket, am I going to pop?
For 11 years, everyone with shoes
would have
could
been
technically have been committing 2 felonies, one for the left, one for the right.
Wow.
For the shoelaces, because the ATF determined that the shoelaces were machine guns. They were then forced to clarify and walk it back in 2017, saying, we upon further review, we have determined that the string by itself is not a machine gun, whether or not there are loops tied to the ends. However, the string is added when the string is added to a semi-automatic firearm to increase the cycling rate. That consequently would be classified as a machine gun. So for 11 years, every shoestring in America was technically a machine gun.
My God, and I used mine every single day almost. I mean, if I got charged for the usage, I spend the rest of my life in jail.
Yeah.
Which is the crazy part.
Yeah. Comments in the comment section if you were a Velcro gang. Growing up. Velcro gang. No felonies. No felonies for Velcro gang. No. But these are the experts, right? The experts that we're told to give deference to. They are so eager to stop us from having fun.
Yeah.
That they, for 11 years, made every 14-inch shoestring in America technically a machine gun.
I'm curious. So when I apply for a job at the ATF, do I actually have to know anything about alcohol, tobacco, or firearms? Or do I just have to know something about law?
I get the impression that they'll teach you. They'll teach you everything you need to know. The only thing that really is beneficial is being really good at killing people's dogs. That gets you in the front door at the ATF for sure.
Wow.
And burning down cult compounds. That helps too. That helps considerably. But yeah, so the ATF is not the expert on this. And one of the fears looking into leading up to this is you're always worried that Supreme Court justices, even if they are pro Second Amendment, even if they are pro gun, do they have the ability to articulate it?
Yeah.
Do they have the ability to really cement the ruling so that it can't be doubted and can be understood by all? And I sent this to you today. I was pleasantly surprised.
I read it.
This might be the first Supreme Court ruling I've ever seen that had diagrams. Had diagrams of how things work. They had diagrams of this an AR-15 fire control group, right? They actually had diagrams showing the different stages of a trigger function. What happens to the disconnect? What happens to the hammer, right? What causes the reset? These are all different pages talking about different parts of the process. And so you look at that like, oh, they actually get it, right? Because when you read the dissent from Sotomayor, she's like, if you pull the trigger once, that's a trigger pull. And it's not a new trigger pull until you let go and you pull it again. First of all, not every trigger is pulled. Trigger doesn't have to be pulled. It can be pushed. It can be however else you want to describe the action.
Yeah. I've seen the palm guns, the squeeze ones. Some people can't pull triggers because of arthritis.
Yeah.
Right? Especially some of the elderly. So they're hanging up on one idea, right? They're trying to demonize one idea to try to get a whole industry to change to just get sweeping legislation. So, but she sounds like a real kook most of the time. It sounds like her dissent was liberally biased, right? But it seems that every other judge did some homework this time, right, Max? How many times have we talked about the Supreme Court
Yeah.
making a ruling too on something where they hadn't done their homework
Yes.
on how the things actually work?
They hadn't done their homework and actually looked into it.
Yeah.
And that's what you're hoping for. You're hoping you'll get in front of a judge who will put Chevron deference aside
Mhm,
and go at this from the position that maybe the ATF is wrong.
mhm.
Under Chevron deference, lower courts are really required to give deference, to defer to the ATF's expertise. And here the ATF is classifying everything as a machine gun. Oh, if you put a spring in your buttstock, that's a machine gun. If you put a shoelace on your M1 rifle, that's a
Yeah.
machine gun, right? Everything's a machine gun. There was a guy who you see this one? The guy who sold these cutout card designs for AR-15 full auto.
Oh?
You ever see the
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
it's
I mean,
called
I'm
the
really
auto
curious.
key card.
The
And
auto
this
key card,
this
huh?
wasn't printed out. This wasn't cut out. The ATF lawyer guy. This was a card the size of your wallet that in a shit hits the fan kind of situation, you could Dremel them out and you could bend them the proper way. And basically that would be an automatic trigger sear. It would turn your AR-15 into a fully automatic rifle. Now,
Wow.
all this was, though, was a geometric design on a metal card.
Yeah.
It didn't even have it. I think it was just printed. It wasn't like pre-stamped, so you just bend it with your hands. You actually had to cut this thing out.
Yeah.
The ATF charged this guy with illegally selling machine guns, and they got a conviction.
Well,
Even
that
though
needs to
the
be
ATF,
revisited.
even though the ATF admitted that they bought these cards, tried to cut them out and make them have a gun fire automatically, and they couldn't make it do it.
Ooh.
But they still got him on the intent, saying that maybe we just did run. That's the experts. You made a machine gun. We can't make it work, but you still made one.
Wow.
This is the craziness of all of this, right? Everything's a machine gun.
Yeah.
Everything's a machine gun. And Mandy just wrote in the comment section, she's absolutely right. That Sotomayor in her dissent wrote that ARs are commonly used firearms. Seems like that just screwed Biden out of being able to ban them. Absolutely right. Let me see if I have that ready to go here. Where is it? Here we go. This is from her dissent. I'll make it bigger so everyone can see. Talking about the shooter in Las Vegas, he did so by affixing bump stocks to commonly available semi-automatic rifles. So the reason that Mandy's right, that she just screwed everyone out of banning AR-15s, is that the Supreme Court's case in 2008, Heller versus DC, held that the Second Amendment protects firearms that are in common use. And so all of these states that are banning AR-15s are all arguing that AR-15s aren't common. They're an uncommon firearm. But now in the dissent from the left on the bench in the Supreme Court, an admission that AR-15s and semi-automatic rifles are commonly available. I guarantee you this is going to be the first thing that gets cited in all of these lawsuits challenging assault weapon bans, arguing that they're in common use.
Wow.
In common use. Imagine being a lower court judge and you're trying to keep an assault weapon ban on the books because you're anti-gun, and you read an argument and it's citing Sotomayor saying that they're in common use. That's going to be hard to just get away from.
Right.
So you're absolutely right, Mandy. Absolutely right.
And she's one of the most liberal justices that's on the bench right now. So just that statement from her, do you think she realized she put that in there? I think she's a smart woman. Are you sure?
Really?
Because it does your side no good to put that in there, right? So
they want to argue that you can't have these bump stocks because there's so many AR-15s out there, you could turn them all into machine guns. So the ubiquitousness of the AR-15 is what they're using to justify banning it. If this was a rare device, if this only made a very rare gun fire a little bit faster, it'd be a lot harder for them to scream from the rooftops that the sky's falling and all of our society is going to fall apart unless you give us what we want. I don't think she knew that. I don't think she knew that at all.
Wow.
she also had something in her decision, which I also put in, that the left is cheering her for. But I'll see what you think of it, Josh.
Okay. All right. So Garland, Cargill, Sotomayor, J. dissenting. Ordinary meaning of the statutory text and unsupported by context or purpose. When I see a bird that walks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, I call that bird a duck. A bump stock equipped semi-automatic rifle fires automatically more than one shot without manual reloading by a single function of the trigger. Because I, like Congress, call that a machine gun, I respectfully dissent. Interesting.
If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, the bird is a duck. That's a really dangerous way to regulate firearms because it's completely subjective.
Yeah.
She calls it a duck and say, "No, Your Honor, that's a goose." And she says, "Nope, close enough to a duck. You're a felon."
Well, wait a minute. I mean,
Your Honor, that's a swan. That's not a duck. Law
yeah.
says no ducks. That's a swan. Nope, you're a felon. We
What
can't
about
live
this-
like that.
Right. I mean, at that point, then if it's got a beak, is a platypus a duck? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of mental
Yeah,
gymnastics do we have to start
yeah.
going through, right? I mean, start taking bits and pieces that they like the best to start throwing in there. And that is
Yeah.
a really odd statement to use in a dissent, because imagine how subjective that becomes down the
Yeah.
line, especially when arguing cases over something, right?
And
It's
basically
foolish.
what it's arguing is that you know it when you see it. Well, that's no way to live as a gun owner or
No.
as anyone. Like, oh, well, this is what the law says, but in fairness, you'll know law breaking when you see it. In some cases, that's probably true. But in terms of a little hunk of plastic,
Yeah.
and the consequence is 5+ years in prison, it should be more than just, oh, if it walks like a duck, it's a duck. No, something is or it is not banned. The shades of gray that the left loves to operate in this is not because they like uncertainty. They like the shades of gray so they can push the line further in the direction they want to push it.
Yeah.
As long as there is a line drawn in the sand, an immovable line, they're stuck with that, right? They hate that. They would much rather like a much broader no man's land kind of gray in between where they can move the line themselves.
Yeah. And when it's great, I mean, you just start filling in text for your own biases, for your own agenda, right? And that's been the way they've operated for so long, because it's the only way they could really get stuff done. That was the only way they could actually get challenges in front of judges to get the kind of rulings that they would want on the left for these kind of really gray areas. And that's been the plan from the start, right? Because it's just about erosion. It's about introducing that doubt into what something is, and that forces a court to decide on it. And then we see all this terrible gun legislation come out because of a bunch of assumptions and gray areas and ideas that that have no merit.
Yeah.
And there's people that have gone to prison over it. You know, there's people that are doing hard time now because of these crazy things. That, you know, I'm just looking more into that that card, right, for the full auto change.
Yeah.
That doesn't even make any sense. You would have to do so much work to make that happen. What happens if I was to just put a line on a card that creates a knife and that goes through TSA on an airplane, right? Is that a knife now? Is that a weapon? Right? Because I'd have to go to physically remove it, do some bending on the airplane, and suddenly I'm carrying a weapon. I don't get it. And they've used that gray area as a tool. And now that gray area is getting more black and white. And it's a good day. But the fight is far from over. I mean, there's going to be new challenges to this. I can't wait for them to happen, because the more the left starts challenging this, the more I think we're going to get a bunch of judgments that continue to reinforce our Second Amendment rights.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's the case.
Sorry, I've been a little quiet because I'm trying to find the spot in
I
this
saw you
ruling
reading. I was
that
filling.
I want to.
I was filling.
I don't know, you fill for time. This is the part that surprised me in how well that they grasp the logic, right? I mean, these are smart dudes. The left loves to denigrate, and I don't know if you saw the new one. The new accusation from the left. Clarence Thomas, for goodness sake, he took a ride on someone's private plane and didn't tell everyone about it.
So
My
now
goodness.
I've seen
My
all the stuff
goodness.
AOC put out trying to
Yeah.
limit their gifts to
And my goodness.
$50.
And Josh, this friend of his, he let him go on his boat. My
Oh
goodness.
my.
My goodness. Do you know that if Clarence Thomas had to buy that boat, you know how much that would cost? Millions of dollars.
Yeah.
That makes it an illegal gift. It's insane. What's next? Ginny Thomas borrowed the neighbor's car to run an errand. That's where we're at. That's where we're at with this. But here's the part where you know that Clarence Thomas really understands the logic of it. He says the ATF argues that a shooter using a bump stock must pull the trigger only one time to initiate a bump firing sequence of multiple shots. This initial trigger pull sets off a sequence fire, recoil, bump, fire that allows the weapon to continue firing without additional physical manipulation of the trigger by the shooter. This argument rests on the mistaken premise that there is a difference between the shooter flexing his finger to pull the trigger and pushing the firearm forward to bump the trigger against his stationary trigger. Moreover, ATF's position is logically inconsistent because its reasoning would also mean that a semi-automatic rifle without a bump stock is capable of firing more than one shot by a single function of the trigger.
Mm.
That's the dangerous part of this. And that's what this has always been about. This isn't just that this little piece of plastic is a machine gun. It's that your semi-automatic gun can be turned into a machine gun easily. That's always been the left's goal.
Yeah.
Right? They banned the plastic. Fine. Well, now we have to ban the guns because anyone can 3D print the plastic.
Sure.
Right? You can bump fire a semi-automatic rifle just by holding it at your hip and wrapping your finger around your belt loop. Or we can't ban pants, so we're going to have to ban the guns. If the ATF got their way, the logic would have held that all semi-automatic firearms are capable of being machine guns. And therefore, they're all banned.
Wow. Yeah, I'm reading. Yeah, his logic on this is good.
They're smart enough to recognize that. They could have just as easily have given the ATF what they wanted. And the ATF turn around, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not the next day, but maybe years from now, and saying, pursuant to this Supreme Court ruling, all semi-automatic firearms are one modification away from being a machine gun, and they're all banned. That's their end goal. But they're smart enough. They know enough about firearms, about how they function, and they're willing to defer to the real experts like Firearm Policy Center that was including those graphics in their briefs, willing to defer to them for the expertise. The left hates this, though. This is from Slate. You would think that this is the end of the world. Slate's headline, Clarence Thomas's opinion, legalizing bump stocks is indefensible.
Wow.
From Mark Joseph Stern. Obviously, you have the Mandalay Bay. You want to do some fear mongering in there.
Yeah.
I want to see if I can find the funny.
In black and white to make it look even scarier.
Here we go.
What do we have here?
This is, let me get rid of this. Now the Supreme Court has decided that it understands firearms better than the ATF. You see, they're defending Chevron deference. Yeah. That's what they hate the most. Thomas's majority opinion reads like the fevered work of a gun fetishist, complete with diagrams and even a GIF.
Oh my God, the next sentence. I was just reading that. I'm like, what is this?
The justice who worships at the altar of the firearm plainly relished the opportunity to depict the inner workings of these cherished tools of slaughter. It's no surprise he borrowed the images from the avidly pro-gun Firearm Policy Foundation. Just take a step back. He didn't borrow it from. That was in their briefs.
Yeah.
Right?
They printed it as evidence.
Yeah. Justices are allowed to quote from the different briefs that are presented them, either from the plaintiffs, the defense, whichever, or from amicus briefs that other organizations have given them their expertise. They're allowed to cite those things. But here, the act of citing it, see, they're not just mad that he reversed it. They're mad that he dared to go into how it actually works. They'd rather everyone not know how it works than have him dare show how it works.
And they make him look like some sort of zealot and fanaticist for just describing how it works that way, which just blows my mind.
This is the GIF. Oh man, what a fetishist!
It's so dangerous. It's so dangerous.
A fetishist. What a firearm fetishist! How dare you show
The inner workings of a trigger?
Yeah, they can't have a animated GIF, but they're saying that the different versions of it were pulled from this GIF. Oh man,
This
how
looks so dangerous.
indefensible! How
I mean,
indefensible!
if kids see that, they might be stricken with fear.
Yeah,
It's horrible.
yeah.
Does he go on to say something about the
Oh,
descent?
talking
How it's
about
awesome.
Sotomayor toggles between scathing and mournful.
My God,
It's it's really hard to read because you realize that these guys don't know anything about firearms, and they're happy to operate in that muddy realm of, well, you don't know about firearms, I don't know about firearms. If it shoots fast, that's a machine gun, right?
If it's a duck,
yeah. If it's a duck, exactly. The minute you get into, well, actually, no, technically, no, you really start to piss off the ends justify the means kind of people.
Yeah.
It makes them mad.
That guy was worshiping in his own altar of anti-gunism. I mean, the hypocrisy in all of these articles is it's there, but they don't care.
No.
They'll keep reporting it this way because they have such an agenda to try to disarm us. Probably because they want to force us all into slave labor in camps, but that's a show for a different day.
Well, right next to Rachel Maddow, apparently. She says Trump's going to put her in a camp. Not for owning a gun, just because she is who she is.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a big ruling, and the reason this is big is because there's other things on the horizon, other cases. You look at the FRT. The FRT is the forced reset trigger. It's a trigger that you can put into an AR-15 and AK-47, and like a bump stock, will make it easier to reset the trigger. I mean, it's not just that these devices don't just make it easy to pull the trigger really fast. The real strength to the devices is they make the trigger reset faster. So they make it reset back into a ready to be fired position. Before, you just need to use the trigger spring. What these devices do, what the bump stock does, is the recoil does it. What the FRT does, I want to see if I can find. Have you ever seen how these work, Josh?
No. I was just thinking about how if the reset was faster there, I could really get on a trigger with my single finger pull and still put off like rounds a minute, right? Even more than that. If we were to count the kind of round shut off you'd have with a force reset trigger, it would just be so much faster.
Yes.
But it's also probably really hard to do.
It can be. So here we go. Where is this? Okay.
I mean, what's doing the action of the reset? I mean, that's all I want to know. But I don't think it's anything that scares people. I don't think it makes something a machine gun.
Here is the force reset.
Breed. Yeah.
This is Rare Breed's force reset trigger. So they're the bolt carrier group.
Yeah.
It has a little bit extra material on it. And that extra material actuates a lever on the way back. So as the bolt carrier, I want to make sure I'm getting this right. As the bolt carrier group is moving to the rear, right? You just fired a shot. The bolt is getting plunged into the buffer tube, right? It compresses the spring, and then it fires the bolt back into battery. As it's being pushed backwards, there's a little bit of metal on it that hits a lever, and that lever physically forces the trigger back forward.
So it's the problem.
So you are ready to pull the trigger as soon as physically possible, right? Because you can't pull the trigger again until the bolt is back in battery. You can't fire another shot until it's cycled once, right? You don't need to be an expert on firearms. You shoot a semi-automatic firearm, you shoot it, it pops the spent case out and loads another round from the magazine into the chamber, and you're ready to fire again. Until that happens, you can't fire a second round. All the forced reset trigger does is ensure that trigger is reset, so the moment you can pull the trigger, you're able to.
Yeah, I mean, it would make an AR shoot much nicer, right? I mean,
Yes.
Even the reliability of this thing, it could probably wear out on you. I mean, I don't see how it makes it a fully automatic weapon, though. You know what I mean? I just don't see it.
It isn't. But If you were to look at one on the range,
Yeah.
Josh, it looks like one.
Does it?
Have you ever seen
Does
these?
it?
Let's see if I can find a video.
No. I've never. Now the Rare Breed. I remember their name coming up with some stuff, but I don't even know if they're in business anymore. But it's just a fast reset. I mean, if you are a competition shooter with an AR, you want a fast reset. Wow. Holy smokes, that's fast.
Yeah. You are
Is he pulling
shooting
that
it.
trigger? What?
He's pulling it, but what's happening is as the bolt is pushing back, it's forcing his finger forward, and it doesn't let him pull the
Oh,
trigger again until the
until it's
bolt's
ready to
back in
go.
battery. So with this trigger, you are literally firing the gun as fast as it can be fired.
Wow.
So the left says that's a machine gun. That's a machine. You can't have that. But the thing with this ruling is, the way this ruling is designed is actually, no, this isn't a machine gun.
Yeah.
Because what the Supreme Court just said is you can have other things that force the trigger forward, cause the reset. For a semi-automatic firearm, you can't shoot 2 bullets unless the trigger resets in between the 2 shots.
Yeah.
Right now, if you were to pull up a gun right off of the rack at a gun store, that reset is caused by a little spring in the trigger assembly.
It looks a lot like slam fire.
Yep.
Like a slam fire on a shotgun. It's no different, right? Because I still have to physically manipulate something. So really, it's just a slam fire AR, and as soon as it resets, the sear pulls it back. Boom, 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 boom.
It essentially, you're absolutely right. It turns your AR-15 into a slam fire by ensuring that your trigger is ready to go as soon as it possibly can.
Yeah.
And the interesting part of that is, this is how you know that at least Clarence Thomas knows what he's talking about. You're a firearms trainer, right? You know your way around a gun. You know that there are certain older model of shotguns that, like the Ithaca model 37, that you can just slam fire as long as you hold the trigger down. Here's the thing: is Clarence Thomas knew that too.
Oh, did he?
And he says, moreover, a semi-automatic rifle with a bump stock is indistinguishable from another weapon that ATF exceeds cannot fire multiple shots automatically. The Ithaca Model 37. 37 allows a user to slam fire, that is, fire multiple shots by holding down the trigger while operating the shotgun's pump action. Each pump ejects the spent cartridge and loads a new one into the chamber. If the shooter is holding down the trigger, the new cartridge will fire as soon as it's loaded. According to ATF, the Model 37 fires more than one shot by a single function of the trigger, but it does not do so automatically because the shooter must manually operate the pump action with his non-trigger hand. So even he understands that there is an element to this all. That's, you're talking about slam firing a shotgun? I used to do that back.
Yeah.
It's like the Star Wars meme. I used to hunt womp rats, not bigger than that. I used to do that at me, my pop's house all the time. Right. Yeah. It's not all that much different. And once you understand that, like, this is just like a slam fire, why are you trying to throw people in prison for slam firing an AR-15?
You couldn't. You shouldn't. But what's the downstream effects of this stuff now? Because if a single, they're defining a single trigger pull, they're defining firearms that are in common use. So what does that mean now for just having a stock on the firearm, having a length of barrel, having a detachable button magazine button, right? I mean, all that stuff's common use. So everybody who's put a ban on all of those things has to revisit this or throw that legislation out or those decisions.
Well, there have been a lot of cases around the country that have tried to deal with AR-15s and have upheld assault weapon bans by saying that you can shoot an AR-15 really quick. So that makes it basically a machine gun. What this Supreme Court decision should settle once and for all is, no, it's not an issue of how fast it fires. It's a matter of whether you only have to pull the trigger once in order to fire it multiple times. Now they say that, oh, you're just pulling it once. Well, no, actually, you're pulling it. It's being pushed forward, and technically, you're pulling it again.
Yeah.
Um,
You are. So
and
you have to pull the trigger.
Yeah, and like the other part of this is, have you ever seen people who put rubber bands on like AK-47 triggers? Ever seen
Yeah.
that?
I sure have.
That's the other bit of it. The ATF says that's not a machine gun. So if we live in a world where you're allowed to use something to force the trigger to reset faster than it normally would and with more force than it normally would, then all of these things, trigger actuators, forced reset triggers, bump stocks,
All
they're
of it.
all on the table
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
all using a piece of machinery to make. I mean, as it is, the trigger is being reset using a piece of machinery, a little spring.
Yeah.
So there is something exerting force on the trigger to force it to reset.
Right.
All
And it
these
should
other
never,
designs are just to try and make it happen differently.
we should never rate it on the rate of fire because there's that shooter out there, Jerry McCulloch,
Yeah.
I think is his name.
Michalak,
He can
Michalak,
shoot a
yeah.
revolver faster than
Yeah.
a grease gun can put its rounds out. Because
Yep.
I remember watching a video of him. He just lays 9 out of this revolver like it's nothing. He picks
Yeah.
up a grease gun. He shoots it. He looks back at the camera and forward because he doesn't realize
Yeah.
how slow it is, right?
Yeah.
He's just blown away by it. And that
Yeah.
should tell you everything you need to know about rate of fire, right?
Yeah.
It's just stupid.
It's just stupid. It's just
It's
completely
just
stupid. But that's the world we live in now, where the
'Cause
good
it's
thing about
dangerous.
this is that hopefully this gives lower courts guidance that this ends justify the means bullshit of, oh, it looks like a machine gun, it's
Mhm.
fast like a machine gun, so it is a machine gun. Hopefully that's gone, right? And now you start
We
looking at
hope.
other things like the force reset trigger. There's other technologies, and
Yeah.
you start looking at the old technologies that the ATF
Yeah.
has gotten away with. Maybe a shoestring isn't a machine gun. Maybe a shoestring never should have been a machine gun.
Max, this is old technology. Like
Yeah.
automatic fires, old technology. It's not like this is anything that's new and modern that made guns more lethal. So if we look at our gun legislation and we try to base things prior to what, 90 something? Is that the date that they usually
1898, I think, it's a firearm. 1986 is when they said machine guns can't be owned by civilians if it's made after 1986.
Yeah.
Anything beforehand, if it was registered before 1986 with the ATF, it's still transferable.
So why is an automatic weapon illegal in its first place? It represents old technology. We have semi-autos that can shoot faster than automatic weapons in most cases. So why, therefore, do we have a ban on machine guns then?
Yeah, no, we shouldn't. We shouldn't. And lots of people think we did. They didn't really get into this. The issue with this case is that it was challenged on like administrative procedure, saying that they didn't do it right. Now, if you remember when the ATF first rolled out its rule,
Yeah.
it had its old rule. Everyone complained about it. And then they revealed a new matrix of how to measure whether your gun, like for pistol braces and things like that.
I remember that. Yeah. If this, then that, right?
Yes. So they've changed over time with the ATF, with the bump stocks. They've changed their mind over time with the pistol brace, which is the other one that we had a huge decision in. They've changed their mind over time. So it's the administrative procedure that, no, you didn't do this right. You didn't go through the proper steps. And listen, Justice Alito, he wrote a consenting opinion where he urged Congress to ban bump stocks. Saying, Congress, it's in your court. So this isn't saying that everyone should have bump stocks, right? Congress is probably going to try and take a stab at this.
You bet.
They're going to probably try and take a stab at this, but it's up to all of us to, just like Michael Cargill said, oh, no one cares if you take bump stocks. We all have to care about it because this victory will help us get more victories in the future. If we let them whittle it down, they're going to do it to stop us from the next win.
Yeah. And there's been way too many anti-gun wins since the 90s, gang. We need lots of these. I mean, there's far too many people who've spent treasure and time in incarceration on things that should never have been charged for them before. Because now I'm thinking, what else is on the table? Like the whole SBR thing, right? I mean, there's been varying sizes of rifles through recorded history. The barrel length is common. It's been used for a long, long time. So why do we have these arbitrary lengths? Why do
Yeah.
we have, whether it's stock on there or not? Why is a magazine more dangerous
Well,
than
do you know
something else?
why? Do you know why SBRs were ever banned to begin with?
Oh, you told me it had to do with World War
Yeah.
II, and it was the
No,
length.
that was the M1 carbine where the
Yeah,
government accidentally gave Americans SBRs, so then they
yeah,
retroactively changed the length. But I read about this in my book. The reason that SBRs were ever even a thing is that Congress wanted to ban handguns. They wanted to ban any concealable gun. So the original drafts of the National Firearms Act banned handguns. And so then they
wow,
said, well, wait a minute. If we're going to ban handguns, we also have to ban shotguns and rifles that are the same size as handguns. And said, okay, yeah, we'll call them short barrel rifles, short barreled shotguns. Well, over negotiations, especially with like the NRA and things, the handgun bit got taken out, but the SBR SBS aspect was left in. So the whole justification for banning short barreled rifles and short barreled shotguns, meaning no one should have a concealable weapon at all, should be out of the window because
yeah,
the Supreme Court has held that we have the right to carry concealable weapons, right?
yeah.
The SBRs only became a thing because they also wanted to ban handguns. Handguns got stripped from the bill, but the SBR stayed in.
Well, Max, this has probably got the left really paranoid, scared. I kind of got a feeling they're going to come out swinging on this one. We might see something in Congress, maybe an act, right? Maybe might be something in the next month or so, right before the election, that they can the Democrats hang their hat on their platform is, we're going to get rid of these dangerous weapons, right? I see this as now kind of a political tool in the next couple of months, leading to the next presidential election.
I'm worried that someone's going to use one of these things to do something terrible just to make it the poster child of what we need to ban. The good news is you can't get them anywhere because everyone who manufactured them is out of business.
Yeah, they're just not there. And if
Um,
suddenly they show up with like 10 of them, you're like, well, where'd you get those?
yeah,
Right?
where'd you
I
get
mean,
those?
where'd you get that? And who gave them to you? Did they have a 3-letter organization help you out with
Yeah,
that? Right?
yeah.
I mean, that's what we'll end up seeing. But Ruby Ridge wasn't
Running
a
out of
thing.
time, so I want to cover the other two cases.
All
One
right.
case in Texas, preliminary injunction against the Biden ATF trying to shut down private gun sales. Before, basically, they said you had to have an FFL if you're in the business of selling guns, and they had all rules on what qualified as in the business. They loosened those regulations to basically be able to claim that anyone who sells any guns could technically count as being in the business of selling firearms. So if you sold 3 guns in a year, they could come in and say you sold guns without a license. And basically they'd hit you with the same charge as
Ooh,
operating an unlicensed gun store, which is
10
significant.
years.
Yeah,
10
it's
years, 10 to
significant.
15 years, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
something stupid.
very significant. So that is shut down at least temporarily. The other big one is with the pistol braces. Like the bump stocks, people hate them because it lets you get close to an NFA firearm without having to jump through all of the stupid hoops to get that NFA firearm. Pistol braces, you attach them to a semi-automatic handgun, like an AR-15 handgun, and it allows you to shoulder it. It's designed to be strapped to your arm, and I've shot it that way a few times, but in all honesty, in all fairness, it is designed to make it shoulderable. But at the same time, a buffer tube is shoulderable. So it's not that big of a real difference, but they're fun. They're fun to use. Fifth Circuit Judge Kaczmarek in Texas, he issued a ruling. And I just want to read briefly. For close to a decade, the ATF concluded that attaching the brace to a firearm does not alter the classification of the firearm or subject the firearm to NFA control. The ATF changed course on this position for the first time in 2023 when it issued the final rule reversing the agency's otherwise longstanding policy. When an agency changes course, as the ATF did here, it must be cognizant that longstanding policies may have engendered serious reliance interests that must be taken into account. It would be arbitrary and capricious to ignore such matters, but this is exactly what defendants did when they inexplicably and fundamentally switched their position on stabilizing braces without providing sufficient explanations and notice. So pistol braces are now good to go. That's fun. So 3 major victories. It's nice to have some good news going into the weekend, right?
It is. I want suppressors to be on the next list.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, want to lower the prices on those.
Yeah, they're pretty cheap. I see when they go on sale, you can get a suppressor for like $300 plus a $200 tax stamp. But the cheap ones are cheap. But we've been asking for a good news day. This is a good news day.
Bravo.
3 major Second Amendment victories in courts. 1 from the Supreme Court, so that's done. The lower ones might bounce around for a little, but they're looking really, really good. And the good news is that is against the 2023 regulation, making sure that the pistol brace manufacturers aren't going to go out of business in the meantime. Before we close, last time we talked about how you need an F-15, according to Joe Biden, to wage war.
Yeah.
I want to show you what Israel's doing against Lebanon right now. This is Israel's northern border wall with Lebanon. They are deploying medieval siege techniques to burn the foliage on the other side of the wall so that Hezbollah can't use the brush to launch attacks against Israel. And so, no joke, they have a trebuchet. They have a trebuchet that they have built out of 2x4s, it looks like. And that trebuchet is firing flaming balls over the fence, specifically to burn the bushes and the trees on the other side so that Hezbollah can't hide there, either to launch attacks against Israel or set up like ambush points for when Israel finally does go into Lebanon. So as much as we need an F-15 to wage war, Israel has shown actually you can go backwards. And not only are they deploying trebuchets, but they also have archers shooting flaming arrows. No
Old
joke.
school's the best school.
Old school. Old school. Why would you spend hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars on flammable ordnance when you can give the boys a pallet of lumber? They can build a trebuchet and you can just launch stuff.
It's cost effective.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I feel like my job, I would feel more satisfied with my job if I got to play with the trebuchet every day.
This is without a doubt probably the only time a trebuchet has been used in conflict this century, this millennium. You're like wondering, like when was the last time a trebuchet has been used in war?
Yeah,
I bet you gotta go back far.
It's got prior to World War I. Probably there might be some examples in some of those Indo-European countries, but it's going to be hard pressed to find it.
So I wouldn't put it past American GIs in like Afghanistan building a trebuchet. I wouldn't put it past them either.
Sure,
but it's definitely cool. So I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention because last episode we did talk about how you need an F-15 to wage war in the modern era. Israel is showing actually no, just take us back to the olden times. That's it for this edition of the podcast. If you like the podcast, subscribe. Links are down below. We are live on Rumble, Twitter, and YouTube. So subscribe there Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We also have the audio edition of the podcast. Find that, set it to auto download. That way you can listen to the podcast as you drive. We try to make it as audio.
Yeah. Share it with your friends. Tell us all about us, everyone. And it looks like we might have lost Max there. But remember, like, share, subscribe. Oh, I've got him back.
I'm back.
Oh, there you go.
Remember, everyone, the fight to take back our country is not over yet. Like and subscribe, but the only way we win is if you all stand and fight together. See you next time.
See ya.